My guest on the show today is Matt Leedham. Matt is somebody that I've gotten to know over the last year. He's a coach. He's a facilitator. He is a connector, and we're going to talk about what that means. He's a creator. He's an artist. I'm going to add he's a bookbinder. I think we might hear a little bit about that, something I know nothing about, and just overall just an awesome dude. So I'm so glad we're making this happen. Matt, welcome. Good morning.
Jason, I'm so happy to be here, man. It's been so much fun working with you and getting to know you over the last year. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, here we are. So Matt and I do some work together. We may talk about that, but really we're probably not. We might talk a little bit about it, but that's not the intention for this interview. This intention is for you all to get to know Matt, because Matt is a fascinating person who has a long and storied history doing a number of different things. And I think we need to get into it because we're going to run out of time if we don't get into it. So Matt, let's kick this bad boy off right now. So first things first, let us know what's something you nerd out about.
Yeah. So, well, you mentioned it a little bit. I'm definitely into bookbinding, which we can talk about a lot. I'm also into fine art photography. I'm into that's on a sort of a personal note, photography, bookbinding, travel, culture, international stuff. I'm really into a lot. I've traveled a ton. And then professionally, I love facilitation, but not just like doing it. I love talking about it. I love dissecting it. I love trying to like master it or help others master it. So, those are a few things, and I'm happy to go down any of those paths.
Yeah. I've got a couple things. What is fine art photography?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because art was something that I never was into. Like, I never thought of myself as an artist or creative like my entire life, like until maybe I guess it was 2016 where things started to change. So just about 7 years ago. But so I had no understanding of art. I didn't understand what the big deal was. I didn't know how to evaluate art. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know any of that stuff. And in 2016, on a lark, with some money from Christmas, I bought an entry-level camera at Costco, like one of those awesome deals for like $400 and you get this whole kit or whatever. And I started taking photographs literally like I couldn't stop. I had something, I don't know what it was, but I just got really, really into it. And that process of taking photographs helped me understand what I think is beautiful or what I think is interesting. And in the process of doing that, I started looking at other art very differently and started to appreciate like what I liked or what I maybe didn't, or what inspired me or what I thought was curious and interesting about other pieces of art. So, for me, I guess fine art photography is photography that is done with the intention of exhibiting it, which includes like printing, which is a whole nother animal, by the way. If anyone's like into photography, printing your photographs is a wonderful way to learn more about photography and about yourself and about what works and what looks good on paper. When you can hold something tangible in your hand with quality, like archival photographic paper with like archival inks, and like you can see the depth in the paper and all that kind of stuff, it changes the whole landscape. And so I think that process of learning photography, of printing photography, helped me understand what fine art photography was. And then in the exhibition of the photography, it's not just a bunch of images you grab and throw up on the wall. It's a matter of like creating a body of work that tells some sort of story. Mm-hmm. And like even the sequencing of the photographs in that exhibition is so important. And photographers, fine art photographers, spend like hours and hours and hours deliberating over this and talking with their colleagues about how to sequence and how to put a body of work together. So anyway, I share that all to say that, we're all photographers these days with our smartphones, and I have lots to say about that too, and to hopefully help people take better photographs even with their phones. Sure. But fine art photography has a bit of an intention of like display and sort of a body of work and that kind of thing.
Oh, interesting. That's okay. So what I'll say about that is I so appreciate people like you, because I love consuming art, but I relate to myself, other than I'm a musician, but any other type of art, I'm just not great. I mean, I can take pictures with my phone, but I'm with you. And my wife is a bit of a photographer. There's nothing better than when you see like a beautiful, like black and white. And my wife sings about and I've seen some of the stuff you've done, or this picture that was taken with a real camera and it's on like a large format, and that wasn't an iPhone photograph, which is becoming, quite frankly, it's becoming harder and harder to determine that. But there's nothing better than that. I love going to, I live in New York, so I love going to photography exhibits and just think that's such a cool thing. And our 7-year-old is really into photography. which is really fun. So we get her the little disposable cameras, and she loves to go and shoot stuff now, and she's getting good. It's really cool.
Dude, that's wonderful because I mean, the one reason I love photography is that with regardless of device that you're using, and by the way, you can use any device, including an iPhone, and create wonderful work. In fact, I have gallery colleagues that have used their iPhone and printed work for an exhibition. So, I mean, it is 100% possible to take wonderful photographs with your iPhone. You know, I think anybody that's taking an image is thinking about what they're seeing, right? I think that like that level of intention of like looking to see, looking to, you know, like trying to frame something, it just like, I don't know, it heightens your experience in the world. And it's kind of like why I love it to combine it with travel, because I'm curious. I like to explore, and photography just like focuses me like a laser on like exploring and looking for things in new places. So,
yeah. So the second thing I wanted to cover briefly, facilitation. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It's some people, oh, facilitation. So you're a teacher.
Right.
And I think you and I share the same context around that word, but love you to define for all of us when you say, hey, I'm a facilitator or I do facilitation work. What does that mean to you?
That's a great question. So there's, and this is again, nerding out a little bit for those of us in the biz here, but there's like lots of lanes, right? Like someone in this field can sort of be in, right? Like you can mentor, you can coach, you can teach, you can train, you can facilitate. And I know like for the average person, like, oh yeah, it's like in the same bucket. And it's tangential, no doubt, but facilitation specifically is showing up to navigate what I would call like the wisdom in the room that already exists. Like I don't necessarily have content as a facilitator. I'm not showing up to teach something. I may have a framework, or I may have a prompt, or I may have something to get the conversation going. But what I'm trying to do is listen between the lines, so to speak, right? This is what a lot of coaches do as well. We listen between the lines, what's not being said, who's not talking, you know, like how can I help connect the dots? How can I bring people out into the discussion? How can we leverage the power of like a group of people talking is facilitation. And I love the aspect of thinking on your feet a little bit and not really having a script to go by. I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with that, and that's totally reasonable, but it's something I really enjoy because it engages me a lot.
Yeah. And then all you have to rely on is your own like knowledge, experience, and trust that it's going to be okay.
Trust is a good word, man. Cause like, it's like, you know, there was an expression that I learned a few years ago when I was working in a different organization. One of the values was around like betting on your own abilities, right? Like trusting yourself to be able to handle the situation no matter what comes up. You know, definitely when I got started, that was a little nervy, right? But like, as you get more and more experience, you're kind of like, yeah, I got this. Like whatever comes my way, it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to help get the most value for this group of people.
And if it's not awesome, in a relationship with people of some type, you can either clean it up if it lands the wrong way, or you can just, hey, like, so that didn't work, like for next, and what do we do for next time? That's one of the beautiful things with this, like this kind of human part of work is it's really usually not our last chance. Usually
usually.
It can be. But.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think there's lots of little tips and tricks you learn along the way to navigate those situations, right? Like you just said, okay, let's take a time out and actually ask the group how they think it's going. I mean, it not only gives you a break, but allows you to like check in and like adjust with transparency with the group, because again, you trust them, you trust yourself, we're going to make a change. You know, there's lots of other things to do too as a facilitator that I love, that I think people that are new to facilitation really resonate with. Like, so for example, if you ask a prompt, give space, right? Give people time to think. And sometimes, I mean, what I really like to do is give people 30 seconds to jot down a thought or an idea to this prompt, right? And there's a couple reasons why we do that. One is, if there's introverts in the room, for example, analytical thinkers, whatever, they might need a little extra time. And so instead of like the loudest, most extroverted person speaking up first, now everybody gets the same amount of time to think about it, jot it down, and it eliminates groupthink too, right? Like you say an idea and everyone's like, yeah, I like that idea too. I'm with you. Like, it's like, no, let's give everyone a chance to have their own idea. And then, we'll talk. Yeah,
cool. We'll have to do probably a whole episode on just this. at some point. I mean,
Yeah.
a 3-hour episode that like we'll have a very specific niche audience for that one. There'll be like the 4 people that we're friends with. Like I have a friend, he works with authors, and he says your first book, if you're not famous, will sell the exact number of copies as family members you have. That episode will be the exact number of people that you and I go, hey, Matt and I did an episode about that.
Exactly.
That's it. But we'll have fun. That's the most important thing. So Matt,
right.
let's talk about, you know, as a coach, you know, the concept of comfort zone, and most of our growth exists outside of our comfort zone. Facilitators, we're always looking to maybe push people out, not push people out, but like encourage, hey, like what's out of your comfort zone. So what is something that is inside of your comfort zone that you know is outside of somebody else's?
You know, going back a little bit to art and creativity, it's something that I wasn't previously comfortable with, but have since become comfortable with being creative, taking risks, you know, that kind of thing. And I find the more and more people I talk to, they're uncomfortable with being creative, or they think they're not creative. And it's really interesting because you can explore this in a lot of different ways. People are obviously creative in a lot of different ways by the way they choose to approach anything, like whether it's family or business or anything like their life. We're always making creative choices, but a lot of people don't view themselves as a creative. And I think it honestly makes me a little sad to see adults, you know, think that they're not creative, or certainly kids. If kids don't think they're creative, of course, kids are just creative by nature, you know. So I think that's one area that I've become comfortable with that I wish I could see others become more comfortable with.
Yeah. Flip of that coin. What's something that you are uncomfortable with, out of your comfort zone, that you know is in the wheelhouse for somebody else?
Yeah, you know, and we probably both coach around this a lot, but people that can definitely handle constructive conflict is something that I admire, right? So like the story I tell myself is that there's people that excel at this and that I suck at it. But it's more likely that everybody struggles with it. And some people just maybe have more experience, or they're able to tap into certain strengths as they need to confront or have, you know, constructive conflict. And like you and I know this too from, you know, personality and behavioral assessments like DISC, which is something I'm very familiar with and done a lot of training on. The way that I frame different sort of personalities is how they prioritize things, right? So, you know, someone that's a high D in the DISC assessment, right, often prioritizes results. And sometimes that's over harmony, like, or relationships, right? They're willing to push a little and make it uncomfortable to achieve results. Whereas someone like me, and I think you actually, or no, I think I'm an IS, which means I So I prioritize like relationships and harmony, and like I want people to sort of get along, and I like the team kind of aspect of things. And so sometimes I'll prioritize feelings and people and harmony over getting results at any cost, you know? And so it's like this interesting balance that I'm kind of becoming more comfortable with, but I really do admire people that can, you know, be in the space of conflict and deal with it well.
It's so funny. I'm just thinking, I know we've talked, we're both trained in DISC. I'm on high ID. So I like the people part, but I'm more like, I really want to hang out with the people, but what are we doing here?
Right.
Like, what are we doing here? What's the result? What's the value? You're more like, I really like the people over here. I want to make sure you feel supported, which is like all valid. That's the whole point of DISC, is it's all valid and needed in the world.
Yeah, it showed up for me one time professionally, like a number of years ago, where like I went into my colleague's office and she was like very high DI, you know, very results driven. And I went in there and I was like, hey, good morning. Like, how was your weekend? Like, you know, chit chatting it up. And, you know, she's like in the zone, like getting stuff done. And she's kind of like, what do you want? And like, likewise, like when she would come to me and I'd be in my office and she'd come in and she'd be like, hey, Matt, I need X, Y, and Z by like X, Y, and Z. And I'd be like, hey, like, can we just talk about like what we're having for lunch or something first? Cause like, I just want to like chit chat before we get into it, you know? And so it's really interesting how it all plays out.
Yeah, it is fascinating. All right, Matt. So if I give you 5 minutes and you get a chance to speak to the entire world, what is it you're going to speak to us about? And this is your one shot that we all get to hear about Matt Leedham, or what you care about. 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, and then at the end of your 5-minute talk, what do you want us to do?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good question. The thing that comes to mind for me is like kind of connecting it back to photography a little bit, but I think more broadly about life, is about composition, right? So composition in photography, in my opinion, is the most important element. And I also again, I apply this to life, right? So what you let in the frame when you're making a photograph or living your life is what makes life beautiful, or sometimes life difficult, right? So we have to be very careful about what we put in the frame, right? What we crop out of photography, of an image, or of our life is equally as important. So I love to look for, I would try to encourage people, I guess, to look for the delicate things in life. In photography, that might be light and shadow, but in life, that might be relationships or something beautiful in your life that you appreciate. I would encourage people to look for the leading lines in their life, right? Again, in photography, that's like a sort of a technique that draws people in, but in life, that can feel like flow. What are the things that are drawing you down a path, and pay attention to that, right? I think finding balance, again, we could equate this to photography, like ratios and things like that. But I think most importantly, the most important thing would be to what I call check your corners in photography. What I mean by that is a lot of times people will take an image that's really cool of like someone walking down the street or something, but they didn't pay attention to the taxi cab driving by in the corner, which totally distracts and doesn't make the picture as good. In life, it's the same way. It's be intentional, be deliberate about what's in your frame, because things can creep in and to really distract you from your true purpose. So I guess it would be this sort of approach to life about what you allow into your frame. And the call to action, I guess, would just be intentional, be deliberate, be paying attention to especially the things that are creeping in on the corners, right? And crop that out.
That really resonates for me, because I when you talk in that analogy or metaphor, I always get the two confused. Is that analogy or metaphor?
Don't ask me on tape here, man.
I know, we're both outing ourselves in this, but my initial thought is, but Matt, my frame, it's so huge, I could fit everything into this frame. Everybody wants to see all this, but that so resonates. I think that's one of the things of being an eye on disc, is one of the things is you like to do a lot. You like to take on a lot. That's a very curious style by definition. So it's that's interesting. And the downside of that is we'd call it SOS, shiny object syndrome. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? That's interesting, versus really focusing on mastering or loving a certain thing.
Exactly, man. Yeah. It's the same thing. Again, I mean, the, I guess, analogy of photography is, an image that's too busy with too much stuff in it is just not as rich, And again, I think it comes down to life too. And it's when you have something that's in focus, or you have something that's in your foreground, so to speak, again, using photography language, that draws you in and keeps you sort of on the path. And so I agree with you, man. This shiny object syndrome thing is a great way to frame it, because I have that same thing. And again, we can go into bookbinding here in a minute, because it's I went from photography to bookbinding almost like a complete switch. And I have the tendency to do that kind of stuff. I get really into something, and then I push the other things aside. And so.
Nice. Well, Matt, I really appreciate the conversation so much. We're going to take a brief commercial break. We'll be right back.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Matt, we're back. So what else do you want us to know about you?
I think the thing that's coming up for me right now is that I care a lot, but sometimes forget to express it. Right. I think I'm bringing that up because it's something that I've noticed about myself that I always want to improve. And sometimes when I talk about it to people, they resonate with that because they're like, yeah, so I find myself often thinking about people or thinking about things and then not expressing it. And it's something I just like, I know that's maybe not a common thing to highlight about my life, but that's something that's really something that weighs on me and something I always want to like invest time in. So that's what kind of comes to mind for me.
Man, that really resonates from getting to know you. You're just definitely somebody who cares. And I would say you somebody that shows that they care. I want to ask you something about this topic. Cause again, like we're pretty similar personalities. I think same Enneagram, like a lot of the same kind of pulls, which is what makes sense. We do similar work because this is good work for our personality types. How much does it hurt when people don't care as much as you do?
Yeah. And that's a great question because like in a professional sense, like I struggle with that because it like,
yeah, me too.
It can often feel that people don't care as much as I do, which probably in like 90% of the cases isn't true. It's like, it's a story I'm telling about myself or about the situation because I am so invested in it. And I'm like, why aren't people more invested in this? And, I think as a coach, we probably deal with this a lot with our clients too, is kind of like, well, again, what's the story we're telling ourselves? What, other people have other priorities in their lives that they care a lot about. How are ours intersecting with them and like all this kind of stuff? It's just very complicated, right? So I've tried as we've gotten older, or I've gotten older. I'm sure you haven't gotten older. I've gotten older.
No, yeah. I don't know what's going on for you, but that's not my experience at all in life.
Yeah. I just appreciate, I don't know. I try to appreciate other people's perspectives and where they're coming from and what they care a lot about, right? I mean, that's sort of like in the tech landscape, we talk a lot about stakeholder management, right? Like, it's a topic that comes up a lot. I think understanding what other people really care about is like an important part of the stakeholder management process. And so I try to think about that a lot as I become like more and more mature about like looking at other people and their differences of opinions and how they approach things and kind of like try to better understand what's important to them. It can come down to personality. It can come down to these like assessments we've been talking about as an example of like framing why people think differently or why I think people don't take things as seriously as I do or why they don't care as much as I do about something. But ultimately, it's about talking about it, right? This is my whole point. It's about expressing it. I need to express to myself and to others what I care a lot about. And then we can have a great conversation and get aligned on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a very wise person once say, people don't care about your agenda. They care about their own agenda. And the sooner, and it's not that people are narcissists, it's just how just how humans operate.
Right. And we're like the center of our own universe, right? I mean, everything revolves around us. In fact, everything we've ever known is through obviously our own perspective, like our own experience. And so of course we're a little self-centered because it's like, it's kind of literally true, right? We literally are at the center of every story we know. So it's interesting to pay attention to that.
Yeah. So Matt, what would you like to ask me that I can answer for you and for the audience?
All right. We'll keep it light for the first question, and then I have a second question.
Ooh, I like the. I don't know are you a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan at all?
This is a great segue to my question, but yes.
If you're going to ask me about Curb Your Enthusiasm, we're going to talk for the next 25 minutes. But you've probably seen the episode where they're at the dinner party and Larry's like, he hates small talk. He asked, it's Chris Parnell, and he's like, hey, so how often do you have sex with your wife? He's like, excuse me. And he's like, I'm trying to elevate the small talk to medium talk. So like, you're going to start with a small, and you're going to elevate it. I'm excited for both of these. So what do you got for me? What do you got? What softball are you going to feed me here first?
So, the segue is this. So I was going to ask, what kind of humor do you most appreciate?
Oh, Kurt, like Larry David style humor. Like, well, and so it's a good question. I've really recently leaned heavily into stand-up comedy. I've really gotten into it. And I think it's because I'm working on my speaking career. I'm working on a better facilitator, better presenter. And there's so many lessons that the best stand-up comedians can tell us about the art and craft of speaking and storytelling. So I really resonate most with, if we're talking about like scripted or like Curb is it's scripted in an outline and then improvised in the moment. We take something like Seinfeld, which was completely scripted. I most resonate with like basic sarcastic humor that like makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I like British. I love The Office. I love the British version of The Office. Like Monty Python, I like, but it's not quite my thing. I like more like, oh, I've been in an office where I worked with somebody just like that, and we had something that wasn't too far off that I can really relate to. Similar with comedians, like some of my favorite comedians, like Chelsea Handler, Joe Coy, where they talk about things you're like, oh yeah, during the pandemic, blah, blah, blah. And like parents, like you all need therapy. I'm like, like, yeah, I really, really like that sort of humor that I can relate. It's relatable.
Yeah.
And I like some off color, not going to lie. Like I like stuff that Chris Rock talks about. I love Dave Chappelle. And I like I am not afraid. I would not do it myself. I'm afraid to deliver it myself, but I'm not afraid of like, let's go out and like take these tropes and just rip them apart. Like make them even more racist or even more sexist. And like, this is Dave Chappelle's thing, right? It'll be like transgender. Right. Let me make this even worse let me just say a bunch of stuff that's inflammatory. I love all that sort of humor, but my all-time comedy hero is Larry David. I just think from day one, when I saw that show and I was a Seinfeld fan growing up as a kid, just the observation, you're like, it's so real. You're like, yeah, that, and especially not when I moved to New York, I'm like, oh, these Seinfeld episodes are wildly accurate. Like this is actually what it's like to live here. I love all that sort of things that I can identify with.
Yeah. And I grew up in New Jersey, in the New York area, just outside of New York. And you're right. Seinfeld was just a home run from my own experience and my understanding of things. And as you were talking,
ever asked me that.
Yeah, cool. And as you were talking too, I was thinking a lot about, you mentioned Joe Coy, but also people that kind of keeping it real and talking about real life things. I was thinking about Ali Wong, who's really kind of hitting a stride right now. And her new show on Netflix, I have to plug.
Phenomenal.
Beef. Unbelievable. One of the best I've seen. Unbelievable, man. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Okay. So my next question, and you control the level of depth here, you know, but the question is, what is something that amazes you?
You might have come co-host the show. That's a great question. That might get added to my list of potential questions. Something that amazes me. And then there's a number of things that come up. I'm just going to go with the first thing that comes up is the level of human creativity. I was on a training this morning where it's a leadership training, and we were talking about being a visionary. And I'm going to use this person as an example. Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer. He wrote Total Recall, Blade Runner, Minority Report, and he wrote these things it wasn't, Blade Runner was called Do Androids See Sheep When They Sleep or When They Dream? It's something like that. And I think he died in 1982, and he wrote most of these stories in like the 50s and 60s, and all of the things that he wrote and like kind of predicted or wrote about are actually all true now. Like everything in there, like there are androids who look like people. There are obviously Minority Report. We're talking about like there is AI that predicts crime now. Right. Not saying it's quite like how it does in Minority Report. So the creativity of people to like be able to see the future before it's there. Also the creativity around things like music and writing and the almost endless supply of things that humans can create if they just set their mind to it. And I know if I think for somebody like you probably have an easier time with that than somebody like me. Like if I said, hey Matt, I want you to go out and grab your camera and go walk for a day and come up with a thing that you could put in a gallery, you could do it no problem. If I did it, I would see myself as it would be kind of crappy. But if you said to me, hey, like here's some chord progression, I want you to solo for 20 minutes over this, I would probably come up with something fairly decent. And just like human creativity just boggles my mind. Not just around technology, just everything that humans have created. It's fascinating. And most of it's to solve problems, but some of it's not. Like, I don't think photography actually, like fine art photography doesn't really solve a problem other than we like to look at it. And I just think that is one thing that really amazes me.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for sharing that. It was really awesome. And I'm a huge fan of the types of movies and the stories you were. I recently reread 1984 and Animal Farm. It's shockingly like good and accurate. It's amazing. But your story reminds me of like why people create. Reminds me of an image I was just looking at through my images of a few years ago. One of my last trips was to Beirut, Lebanon, before the pandemic. And I took an interesting picture with my iPhone, by the way, because I didn't have my camera like in my hand as I was kind of going by. But there was a bombed out building from the Civil War back in the 70s, 80s, time frame. And the building's like blown in half and it's just like open, like you can see the rooms in it. And it has since been converted into like a mechanic shop. They sell tires or something. And somebody painted the whole building like different colors in different rooms. And it's just like they turned something ugly and terrible into something beautiful. For what reason? Just to create something beautiful, like just to change something into something beautiful. I love that,
Yeah, that's so cool. Awesome question, Matt.
Cool.
You have anything else for me?
No, I think we'll pause there, man.
We went the medium talk. We went to medium talk.
Yeah. Well, I didn't ask you about, like what Larry David went.
We didn't go quite Larry David there. Thank you for that. So Matt, what are you passionate about?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot of it. I maybe the one area that is kind of current for me right now, at least creatively, is this bookbinding. We haven't talked about that. So, bookbinding, people like often ask me like, what do you mean? Like, everybody's obviously got like a million books in their house and have read a bunch of books, but like, what's bookbinding about? When during the pandemic, I couldn't interact with my photographer colleagues, but I was having a virtual Zoom meeting with one of them just to connect because we hadn't seen each other in a while. And I said, what have you been up to? And he's like, well, I just made a photo book. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like you went on a like Shutterfly or whatever online service and you like ordered a book and they shipped it to you. And he's like, no, I made it. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, hold it up. And he was showing me like how he made the book. And I was like, huh. And see, this is what happens. Like when I get introduced to an idea, then I spend 600 hours on YouTube and I started buying all sorts of books and equipment and tools and like trying it myself. And so I got like really into this whole process of going back to like, not only like the early 1800s, but like even medieval times of like how books were first constructed. And book structures is like, it's a real thing. There's various book structures, right? Like what we're used to today, like if you order a softcover book on Amazon or whatever, that's called like a perfect binding. It's like, it's kind of like all the pages are cut and then it's like glued on the edge and you can open it, it stays glued. That's like
glued. There's like a softcover book, there's no like thread
stitching.
Or anything.
Yeah, there's no stitching, right? Yeah. In a hardcover book, you'll start to see what's called signatures, which are a group of pages folded together and then stitched through and then somehow combined in the spine and like all this other kind of stuff. But in medieval times, they use things like rope and calf skin and like all sorts of like glues, like wheat paste, which is it's a natural glue. It's literally like taking like this powder, mixing it with water and creating a substance that acts like a glue and lasts for hundreds of years, by the way. So getting into all sorts of like, I got into paper making, paper marbling, which is like another way to decorate paper, use that in the book making process. I've got all sorts of equipment and book presses now from Europe. Like my recent purchase, my baby that I'm loving right now is a cast iron book press made in 1875 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That was around during the time of like Deadwood, if anyone's watched that on HBO, or like, back in the days where the like early printing presses and like bookmaking. And I'm so fascinated by it that I found the original catalog, the seller's catalog, the sales catalog with that book press in it, 1875. It was on sale for like $18 or whatever. I printed out this catalog from Google Digital Books. I bound the book and pressed it in the press from 1875, like super like meta style.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just like geek out about this stuff. I'm super passionate about it right now. And I could go on and on. I know a lot of people are like really curious about it because they just, typically most people don't think about book structures, but I just love it, man.
That's super cool. Your wife support the hobby? Because it sounds very time consuming.
time consuming and expensive. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, man. Like ordering like from a master woodworker in like Portugal, like ordering like a handmade like book press that, you know, that's like specialized tools. Like I get these brass tools and stuff. I mean, it's really the expense of it. And now if you come down to our basement, you know, yeah, I've got 6 book presses, man. Like it's kind of like, I'm getting the look of like, it's enough.
If we're going to, my friend Aaron, during the pandemic, he's a tech person. Works at a big tech company. He really got into woodworking for the first time. And his initial foray into woodworking was hand tools only. And I'm like, bro, have you ever built anything by hand? But this is the beginning of the pandemic when he was suddenly home. And he spent a lot of money on really nice, like hand tools, like hand planers. And he bought me a Japanese saw, so I have a Japanese saw. It's great. But it's, you know, we're talking about bring it back to Larry David, because it's always Larry David. I can imagine you're like, so honey, I'm concerned of the books. It'll be like, it should give you the kind of, do we need a 7th book press here in the house? Do we really need it? Exactly. I'm not so sure about that.
Oh man, exactly. And now that I recently just actually got into like leather, trying to cover books with leather, which is a whole nother animal, literally. Yeah. I did not intend to say that, is the knives that you need to cut leather and like shave leather, sort of like you were saying, like wood planing. There's tools to help like shave leather down so that it's thinner in the spine and like all this other kind of stuff. And these are all handmade tools, and it's insane, man. And
I'll tell you, this is one area where you and I are wildly different. I'm thinking about all this process. I'm like, this sounds way too detail oriented for me. I'm like, tools that have to cut certain specific. No, if I ever need a book bound, I know who to go to. I got a guy. That's good.
Yeah.
Matt. So what's the thing you're most proud of?
When I think about that,
if you say your new book press, somebody like,
no,
that would be awesome.
No. I'm actually like, I'm really proud of the people around me, actually. So like when I think about my wife, she's a really compassionate and inspirational leader. She immigrated to the States when she was 9 years old with her family, had a really interesting experience sort of integrating into American society, and now gets to work with immigrant families and kids that are sort of struggling to get through those sort of teenage years and things like that. And she's just doing wonderful work locally here in that regard. I'm proud of my niece. I got a 5-year-old niece, or she's almost 5, a 5-year-old niece who it just blows me away. Everything she does, I'm proud of. You know, I'm just like doting over her. Yeah, I think, and then one thing I'm proud of, I guess maybe more personally though, that like in life is, we can dig into, I don't know how much time we have, but like when I was growing up, I had a brother and a sister. My sister was 8 years older. My brother was 9 years older. My brother and my parents had some fallings out. And when he turned 18, left the house and said like goodbye. And like literally like that was it. Like no one had spoke to him for like 18 years. And it wasn't until right before I got married where it started really coming up for me, like emotionally, like feeling like I have a brother out there and like what's going on, that I decided to try to find him. And it literally was, I had no idea where to start. I started Googling like friends from his high school years, trying to like find a way to connect with him. And it was really hard, even though I had no problems and my brother had no problems with me. Like, it wasn't like we had the issue, but calling him the first time was frightening. I mean, to be honest with you, but like getting over that and then making that phone call. And then since then, you know, he's like one of my closest friends. Like we talk like, you know, every week. He still lives in New Jersey, comes down to DC all the time. We have a great relationship. We've traveled to Utah together and like, you know, went to some of the national parks and stuff. Like just having that relationship right now is like, I'm really proud that I was able to get over that fear and that we were able to build that relationship again.
What a lesson. Yeah, that's super cool. So Matt, what's something that you're afraid might be true about you?
You know, what's so funny is that having just said that whole story about my brother, you know, I think what I'm most afraid of is that it's too late. I don't know. Maybe that's what like drove me to call him, but like, it's too late. You know, I think sometimes to create more, to express myself, to be of service, to be present. Like I have this like nagging feeling that like it's too late. Like I'm not like, I don't have enough time. I don't know where that comes from, but it's something that does sort of like, I don't know, elicit fear in my heart a little bit. And kind of, it does drive me in certain ways, but it also does freeze me up in certain ways.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, are you present to kind of how do you compensate for that fear or the feeling of that fear?
It's a good question. I think that's sometimes where that degree of focus and depth comes from. When I get like really into things, I want to try to like learn and master it before it's too late, I guess. Like I'm very driven to like learn as much as I can as quickly as I can. I'm also like, I think about travel. Like I've been to like 50 countries. I've been to a lot of interesting places. And I think this was pre-pandemic, but like I was so driven to go as far and as many places as I could and experience as many things as I could, almost to a degree that was maybe not as healthy for me or my relationships as it could have been. But like, I think that's what drove that. It was this feeling like it's too late or there's not enough time.
Yeah. So Matt, as we start to wrap up here, curious to get your worldview. So how do you see the world? And I would love to ask this of people that are in coaching, but then the bonus here is you're also an artist and a photographer. So like, how do I see the world? Well, I see it through my viewfinder. And no, I'm kidding. Maybe you do. Maybe that's how you see it. But yeah, like how do you see the world?
So I think travel and photography for me are sort of linked, especially if you look at some of my photographs. It's either landscape, like usually international, like foreign landscapes, but also I'm really into like culture. And so I think for me, what comes up for me is like, we have more in common with others than we realize, right? Like, and I've said this before in other contexts, but like any interpersonal or intercultural or interpolitical conflict could be frankly easily resolved by simply like having a meal with each other, right? Like sitting down and just like having a talk with someone that's completely different than us usually totally disarms whatever potential prejudgments or ideas we might have had, right, with someone. So for me, a successful like international trip is when I get the chance to enter someone else's home. Like I've been either welcomed in or there's some reason I'm either having a meal or I'm getting to know someone personally by seeing how they live. That for me is so eye-opening. And I've done that in a number of countries, which again, just like lightens your heart to like other people's experience. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone's doing the same thing. They want to be happy. They want to be at peace. They want good things for their children. They want to be successful. They want all the things that all of us want, right? And I think when I travel, the one thing that has stood out to me the most, actually, and this is weird because I don't even have kids, but is that the sound of children playing, like in a schoolyard or playground, of children just interacting and having fun and playing with each other is the same anywhere you go, like literally, right? Like, I mean, from Bangkok to Guatemala City, like from like Springfield, Virginia, where I am right now, to Jerusalem, like you walk by a schoolyard, it sounds the same, right? And it's just a reminder to me that like, we're all the same. Let's just get to know each other, man. I think that's I always encourage people to travel, not to go to like Cancun and hang out on the beach, although there's nothing wrong with that. Trust me. You just got back from the Caribbean and like, I enjoyed that too, going to the beach. But I mean, travel with some intention, travel to like explore and understand. And it honestly would solve a lot of problems. I think if more people did that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I'm never going to forget that. No matter where you go, the sound of children playing is the same.
It is
so true. Man.
Yeah.
Matt, you mentioned earlier, we mentioned at the beginning that you are a connector. How can people connect with you? Because I know you want to connect with people. So how can people find you, connect with you? What's the best way to... And I think there's a variety of things. You want to talk about book binding. That's probably a pretty specific niche of people. I'm guessing that's also I'm guessing that's a very passionate community. The more niche it is, generally the more passionate it is. But, you are not only... You're a photographer and an artist, but you actually do some gallery work too. So people are local. They want to see that. They just want to connect with you and, just get to know you more, just see what you're up to. What's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is that I was previously very into social media. I have since like fallen out of social media, like fallen out of love with it, at least. I feel like it's really distracted me a lot and relationships and things. So I'm not as good as I used to be on social media, but the easy way to find me is just to remember my name, right? So I'm at mattleedham.com. You can email me at matt@mattleedham.com. On Instagram, it's @mattleedham. Leedham. I got very lucky by claiming a lot of these names.
Yeah.
But honestly, if someone wants to connect, the thing I would love the most is an email. Ask a question, reach out. Matt@mattleedham.com would be awesome.
Awesome. That's all going to be in the show notes. Please, as you can probably all tell, people listening, Matt is an awesome dude. Definitely want to connect with him. And Matt, last thing here. Usually I ask for some words of wisdom, but I kind of think you may have given us the words of wisdom already. The thing about the kids that I'm not sure that can be topped.
Well, I'll say two things. One is thank you very much. This has been awesome. Love you.
My pleasure.
And thanks for the time. And I guess what I would leave people with is something I try to focus on, which is love more, fear less.
Love more, fear less. Love more, fear less. And the sound of children playing, it's the same anywhere. Beautiful, Matt. So good we made this happen, and wish you the very best of all the things that I know you're up to, the bookbinding, the photography, the facilitation, the coaching. And I'm sure next time we have you on, you'll have something new. It sounds like you'll likely have a new thing that you're rocking and rolling with. Hopefully this time it's a little less expensive.
I'm sure my wife would appreciate that. Hey, thanks, buddy. I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.